So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the first YouTube edition of the Pottscast Wrestling the Lowdown Conversations. And first up, I have WrestleMania attending super fan, Doctor Who fan, Neil Campbell. Neil joins us all the way from his couch in beautiful Whitehead, Northern Ireland. And today's topic, before we get right into it, the Mount Rushmore of wrestling, quotation marks, your favorites. So this will be Neil's favorites in terms of his Mount Rushmore. Neil, welcome back to the show.
Thanks very much for having me. It actually does feel like it's been quite a while. I suppose it's been nearly 2 months since we last done that Royal Rumble one. It's ages ago when you think about it.
Yeah, we've had Elimination Chamber in the way, and a very short Elimination Chamber, actually, just over 2 hours long. Elimination Chamber done and dusted, and we're back here with a preview show, and this will be going out on hopefully the weekend of Fastlane, should I receive everybody's recordings. But let's get right into it. The Mount Rushmore of wrestling. It's too hard to pick, in my opinion, so we've went for the Mount Rushmore of your favorite wrestlers. And I want to do it in backwards order. I know who your number one is. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but coming in at number 4, who is it and why?
Right. So my number 4 is, this is really difficult between 4 and 3, but for number 4, I'm going to go The Undertaker. He was one of the guys that when I first started watching wrestling, he just made his comeback not long after at Judgment Day 2000 in the whole brand new American Badass gimmick. And it just resonated with me. I just really, really liked it. And he was getting great pops and stuff. And obviously, even before I got into wrestling, I'd obviously heard of The Undertaker. So he went on to have such a sustained and epic career, and WrestleMania became the streak and The Undertaker. I don't think it should have ended, personally, but he's such a legend. You know, he's had numerous world title reigns. He's been some great feuds. He's had some of the best matches ever in WrestleMania history. And I really don't think you could last that long in the wrestling business and be so relevant for so long without being top drawer. So I think Undertaker, he is definitely in the top 4. It was a push where to put him 4th or 3rd, but I've put him in 4th place. And again, you know yourself, we've been to WrestleMania, his entrance is something else. You know, it really does make the hairs in the back of your neck stand up. So I think he goes in 4th place. And he's even his match last year at WrestleMania against AJ Styles was super. And then I don't think anybody could disagree when you say his WrestleMania 25 match against Shawn Michaels is one of the best, if not the best, not even just WrestleMania match of all time, but arguably the best wrestling match of all time. Just putting it out there.
Yeah. I mean, Big Daddy Deadman has to be in and around the conversation. And as you mentioned, when you see his entrance at Mania, it is just something different. It's funny when you're sitting in the house watching it, you're kind of like, come on, hurry up, 5-6 minutes to walk down. But when you're there in the crowd, it really does just take on another dimension, I guess. Interesting. I didn't expect you to pick Undertaker in your top 4, so that has shocked me a little bit.
Right?
It has. I expected someone, maybe an Edge or William Regal or someone like that. Specifically,
William Regal.
I thought you always liked Regal and the old 2001.
I do, but he's I do, and like this ridiculous English theme tune. But I don't think he was worthy of the top 4. I've high standards, I'll say.
High standards indeed. Well, who's in at number 3?
Right. This again, it was hard but picking between Undertaker and this fella. Number 3.
Is it Sheamus? Because you said this fella. I thought it was you're just playing into the gimmick.
Oh no. Number 3 is Brock Lesnar. So I already mentioned the breaking the streak there, but it was, do you know what? The more I've thought about this, people go on about Brock Lesnar. Oh, he's part-time, he's boring, this and that. And what I love about Brock is he does not give a toss what these people think. And what I like about Brock is he stands in the ring, doesn't have to say much, gets paid millions, right? And he just soaks up all the boos and all the comments and all the jeers and just laughs at it. And I love it. Do you really think Brock Lesnar gives a toss what some basement dwelling internet marks think. Like that, they hate him. They hate him because, like, oh, he doesn't like wrestling. He's never been committed because he left in 2004. So what? Big deal. Like, but that doesn't take away from the fact he's still an excellent wrestler. You can't be NCAA champion. You know, you can't go to New Japan Pro Wrestling, be their champion, being champion numerous times, obviously, in WWE. And I'm okay when he wins the belt. Like, I do think it should be defended more often, obviously, but he is box office and he is an attraction. And again, sort of recurring theme, places we have been to and stuff. We were at the Raw in Miami when he made his comeback, and it was epic. And one thing as well I like about Brock is when he speaks, it's as if it's off the cuff and he hasn't prepared it or anything like that, and it feels more natural. And you only need to go the time where, you know, he goes suplex city, bitch, the Roman Reigns, or the time where he's doing the boom box with the Money in the Bank, and then Paul Heyman is like talking about the contract, and Brock's just like, I got a year to cash in. But he says it so naturally that you probably think, do you know what? You could probably believe Brock to be like, he probably doesn't actually know the stipulations. But like, I just think he's entertaining, and just even, I don't think he gets the credit for some of the matches that he deserves. You know, he had a great match with AJ Styles. He had a great match with Daniel Bryan. He had a great match that we talked about with himself and John Cena and Seth Rollins. And, like, you know, he's had numerous great matches against other people as well. And the more you think about it, like, I mean, that time we were in Miami for that was nearly 9 years ago now. So he's actually fought so many people on the roster: Undertaker, Triple H, Roman Reigns, Rollins, Ambrose, you know, Rey Mysterio, AJ Styles, Daniel Bryan. The list is endless. So he's fought so many people, Drew McIntyre. And people say, like, oh, he's selfish and doesn't give back and all. Well, I mean, you only have to listen to the likes of Drew McIntyre that are like, no, Brock really helped me and really put me over. And he does give back. And even, like, you know, the Goldbergers, another person he's feuded, you know, remember the time Goldberg beat him in, like, really, really fast, and Brock was just like, no, I need to lose here. I, like, you know, there's money in this feud, you know, I'm not just squashing him. Now that's a downside where I don't like, for example, the Kofi Kingston match was a squash match and stuff, but that wasn't Brock's fault, obviously. But I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. He is a really good wrestler, especially when it comes to working with smaller guys. Finn Balor was another one. So yeah, like, I'm going Brock. He keeps me entertained. And at the end of the day, that's what it's about.
I agree. And I actually think he's the best seller in the business, especially now. If Brock Lesnar decides that he wants to make you look good, and I think that's where the big hinge is with Lesnar. If Brock Lesnar decides, and if he decides to make someone look good, he makes them look like $1 million. Or if he thinks they're just rubbish or doesn't care, doesn't like them, like pretend, like an Ambrose, for example, at Mania in Dallas, it's just like, nah, I don't care. We'll just figure it out when we get out there. Who cares? You know, but then there's like other people where he goes out of his way to make them look good. The Daniel Bryans, the AJ Styles, all that sort of stuff. And I agree.
CM Punk.
Yeah, it's another one. I think Braun Strowman as well. I think he really tried to put Braun over. Then when he realized that Braun's a big clumsy moron, he decided, I can't be bothered with him anymore.
Well, but again, do you remember the time he hit him the dig at the Rumble a few years ago? And you're just like, oh, I love Brock. And then he made Samoa Joe very strong as well.
Yeah, he did.
Their feud. Yeah, so
yeah,
no,
I don't. Great.
Yeah, no, so I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. And as I said, I don't think he should have ended the streak. I can see why they did it. But I mean, you were there. You'll be able to talk about it better than me. The atmosphere whenever Brock broke the streak, you said it was amazing.
I loved it. I mean, the whole place was silent, and you could hear, like, when I say silent, I don't, obviously not complete silence, but the whole place was in shock. And you could hear the odd person cheering, like me. And then you had, like, loads of people around just like, whoa, what's happening? And you had, like, the people a couple of rows behind you being like, it was a fast count, they're going to restart. And then you had, like, other people, you know, just shouting out things and all that sort of. No word of lie. Like there was people going, it was a botch. There was loads of stuff going on, and I was just standing screaming my head off, being like, "Yes, this is great!" And the fact that what I loved about that, actually, one of the key things about that match, that I think, I'm curious if this was actually a work or if this was on purpose. When Brock actually won, Heyman was like, "Oh my goodness," and then like jumped into the ring, and they didn't hit Brock's music for a good like 6 or 7 seconds. It was almost as if the sound guys were in shock, as if they were waiting to put on Taker's. I don't know if that was actually meant to happen or not, but I always thought it was great. I agree. Taker's streak should never have been lost, but for that moment, I loved it. Like, just for the experience and the shock factor, it was awesome.
Well, we were all watching it in the fly, obviously over here, and the place was stunned. And like, do you know what? Like, it was always a case of nobody ever thought Taker would lose. But I always remember, and I'll give him credit because I think he's coming on this as well, and he got it right at the time. The only person at the time that said Brock Lesnar is going to beat this streak is Johnny Luke. He did say it. He's like, Brock is going to beat the streak. We're like, no chance, mate. And he did. And so everyone was completely shell shocked, like you say. And I'm sure it was obviously 100 times more effective over there when it actually happened. But Jesus. But yeah, legend. I love him. He does, what I like about him is he does not care. And he's legit. I mean, he's a UFC champion as well. I mean,
yeah, you don't get any more legitimate than Lesnar walking down in a wrestling match. And the funny thing is, where you have people being like, you know, like one I always thought was funny, and this is right, I don't really particularly like squash matches, but when they done Ricochet versus Lesnar in Saudi, and people were complaining it was a squash match, I'm like, why wouldn't it be a squash match? He's 140 pounds against Brock Lesnar. What are you talking about? The only way it goes longer than being a squash match is if Ricochet runs away from him for a while. Like, I didn't get it. But yeah, Lesnar, legend, love him.
Yeah, no, I'm not a fan of squash matches unless they should be. Sometimes they're adequate, but other times I didn't like the Kofi Kingston squash match, but that's another story for another day. But here's another example: the R-Truth with Brock Lesnar segment. Brock's just sort of like laughing at him and just bends him. Love it.
Yeah, it was great. The only thing actually one of Brock's greatest moments since returning in 2012, I don't know, you'll maybe get a laugh out of this. I loved it when he came out and beat up 3MB. Remember on Raw?
Yeah. And then there was the other time when Heath Slater was saying like, I got kids and all, and the Brock not say something like, I don't give a shit about your kids or something, and then just
it did. It was brilliant, epic.
No, and there's another one where he binned Bo Dallas as well. That was funny. But yeah,
one more thing we can't forget with Lesnar is when they were doing that stunt with JJ Security, and he ripped the door off the car and threw it and hit a fan.
But that's what I mean. It's just so off the cuff with him. You don't know what's going to happen. No, I think that's what makes him funny and believable, is just that it is just so off the cuff. And like I said before, he's very, like, it seems like he's very rash and off the cuff. Like that time John Cena and Seth Rollins started fighting, and then Brock standing with the belt, and he just sort of like throws it to the ground and runs over it and hits a German suplex. What a guy. Like, but no, he doesn't get the credit he deserves. Yeah. And then, I mean, even the accomplishments before he left in the first place, like youngest champion at the time, you know, he beat The Rock, you know, he won the Rumble 2003, he had great matches with Kurt Angle, he had great feuds with Undertaker, and those things are sort of forgotten about as well, just because he's sort of part-time now, but they do need him, to be fair. In fact, I hope he comes back for WrestleMania.
Yeah, you and me both. Now, number two, I know who your number one is, so who's your number two? Who's in second place? Because I have an idea who it is, but then I'm also torn because of I know who I think it could be, and I think I'm so torn between who your number two is.
Well, you obviously think you've known my number one and my number two, so if I tell you my number two, you'll know who my number one is, obviously. So number two is The Miz, and I think I'm one of the very few people that from day one I've loved that guy. And I mean, like, whenever he became a singles competitor, like on his own, and he came out straight away on Raw and he did this thing, he was coming out and challenging John Cena to show up and fight him every week, but John Cena wasn't there. So every week it was like, oh, I've beaten him once, next week I've beat him twice, and it was just nonsense. And then when they had the match, John beat him obviously, but he is outstanding on the mic, and I'm one of these ones obviously can appreciate good wrestling, but I like to be entertained, and promo work, and being able to talk on the mic and stuff, and just all around being charismatic and being a character to me is more important, because it helps you connect, whether it be as a good guy or a bad guy. Because if you're not getting any reaction, there's no point. And Miz to me just ticks all the right boxes. And I said to you the other week, Gar, for me, out of people in the modern era, the only person that could properly hold his own, like in a proper slanging match with the likes of, say, The Rock or John Cena, is the Miz. And I'm not just talking about cutting a promo, because people can cut promos and cut good ones at that. He's very good at off the cuff put downs and stuff. Like the one before we did with The Rock and John Cena, the O brothers, overhyped and overrated. And I was like, this is great. Like, he's so good. And when he had that rise, as a singles competitor, where, he won the US title, and then he won Money in the Bank, and then eventually cashed in to become champion, it was amazing. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that he's the greatest world champion of all time. He wasn't. I mean, at the time, I always thought he would hold the belt for a couple of months going into Mania season, and then he would drop it. But it didn't work out that way. And they sort of undermined him, I thought, with the run. But the whole, even in the dynamics between The Rock and Cena, and you had Miz in there, and he was still involved every week. And I know he did become a bit of an afterthought, but the time he came out painted and dressed as The Rock, and then hit rock bottoms and all that sort of stuff, it was brilliant. But he could hold his own. And even then, in later years, when he was unbelievable as the Intercontinental Champion, and he cut those promos on Talking Smack, on Daniel Bryan, and then there was ones on Dean Ambrose and stuff, were absolutely hilarious. And he's so good, and his wrestling's improved as well. And I can never understand why Jim Cornette hates him so much. It just baffles me. I think the guy knows he's wrong and will not admit it, and he continually slags him off. But what I like about Miz is, again, he's another one. He does not care, and he thrives on the fact people hate him. And I mean, I was lucky enough, fortunate enough, one of our friends, obviously through his work, met the Miz, and he recorded a message for me personally, and thanked me for being a big fan of his and stuff and all. It was a nice touch. So yeah, and the Miz for me, he goes in. I'm not saying he's a stellar wrestler. I think he's solid. And obviously last week, we had the whole thing, he wins the title, but he's a great scheming heel. And we knew he wasn't going to hold the belt for long, transitional champion stuff. But when you think about it, the amount of accolades he's had, he's won the WWE Championship twice. He's won the Intercontinental Intercontinental title numerous times. He's up there at the very top of that, for the upper echelons, the IC belt. And then he's won the US title a couple of times. He's won Money in the Bank. He's now a movie star. He's got his reality TV show. Legend. Love him.
Surefire Hall of Famer. And he's the type of character that I think every company wishes they had him is. Turns up on time, does his job, gets a reaction from the crowd. No matter if he's in a stupid storyline, which it looks like he will be, get into WrestleMania with Bad Bunny, when he was just out of holding the title, it doesn't matter. He's always on the show. He always has TV time. He always has time on the microphone. They obviously value him. His career speaks for itself. He's never injured anybody. He's never been injured. I think his career just speaks for himself. I don't see him as one of the greatest of all time. But when you look at different people's careers, and people talk about Big E should be this and Big E should be that, and Aleister Black this and Aleister Black, and then you compare someone like Miz, put their careers side by side. Miz has had an outstanding long career that when he decides to retire from wrestling, should that be tomorrow? Should that be in 5 years' time? Because he never gets hurt. He retires and never has to work at the end of his life, and fair play to him. And I think that's a big thing.
Another thing as well with the Miz, he's one of those guys that he can be in the main event, he can be in the upper mid card, he could be in the mid card, or he could be on the dark match. And no matter what he's doing, he's entertaining, and it works. You can put him in anything, any situation, and he's brilliant at it. And he also wears fantastically flamboyant suits, which is always a a plus as well. But here's another example of his great promo work. The time where Roman Reigns and John Cena are in the ring and The Miz came out and just absolutely scalded the pair of them, and the crowd were cheering him and all. Like, do you know what I mean? He's brilliant, like. And when he cashed in 2010, it was a great moment, like, not just for him, but, you know, for his fan base as well, I suppose. I know it's not the biggest, like, but yeah, I don't. Again, he's another one. I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. And similar to Brock, he's another one that is hated by the internet smart fan base, and he does not give a toss. So fair play to him. He's done magnificently well for himself, and he's hilarious. I've loved him. I've always loved him and always will. What a guy.
One of the things that go under sort of the radar with The Miz, in my opinion, and we'll move on to your number one now, and this relates very closely to who your number one is, given who I know it is. But in a wrestling world for the last 5, 6, 7, maybe even 10 years, where promos have sounded like something off Broadway and very, very scripted, Miz's always sounds natural, even though it is a script. It's his charisma, the way, I don't know, whatever way he does it, whatever way he delivers promos, it never sounds silly and stupid. Albeit some of the lines they give him are really silly and stupid, but his delivery is excellent. And speaking of delivery, we have finally, and I mean finally, come to number one on the Campbell Mount Rushmore favorite wrestlers. So without further ado, enlighten us all to who is your number one on Mount Rushmore, who is the biggest face of the four.
I mean, it was difficult, but, you know, I eventually got there and I had to pick Doink the Clown. You know, what a phenomenal career he's had and all. No, you know. Oh, what happened there?
I don't know. Doink the Clown. You went Doink the Clown, so you're muted for your stupidity.
No, obviously, you know who number one's going to be. It's obviously The Rock. When I first started watching it, The Rock was like the guy, and I had a load of, you know, great characters and superstars back then. You had The Rock, Triple H, Undertaker, Kane, you know, Jericho, Angle. Austin came back not long after that, so, you know, it had such a great roster. But for me, the one that, you know, drew me in and like kept me glued to the TV, especially, you know, when he had a microphone in his hand, was The Rock. And for me, he's my like number one. And again, like I know I've said, you know, The Miz is somebody that's amazing on the mic, but nobody holds a candle to The Rock. He is just he like holds the audience in the palm of his hand, and he's one of those guys that no matter what he's talking about, you want to listen. And again, he's another one that the internet lot are just like, no, he comes back all the time and says the same catchphrases, and what? He's over. He's brilliant. He always gets the reaction. And again, he's another one that people don't really give enough credit to for his actual wrestling ability, because there's people that there's wrestlers that people go on about and like, oh, he's brilliant and he does this and he does that, and then they forget about people that they're just like, oh, he's only a star because of this and that and on. It's like, no, he's actually a really good wrestler as well. And The Rock was like that. You know, people just think, oh, because he was so good in the mic, you know, that's the reason why he's like so much. But it wasn't just that. It can't just be about that. It's my number one thing that I look for, but you have to be a good wrestler as well. And The Rock was a good wrestler.
I agree with you. And, you know, we mentioned earlier Shawn Michaels Taker, Mania 25 and even Mania 26 is some of the greatest wrestling matches of all time. And they're up there. But for me, you asked me my favorite WrestleMania match ever, Rock Austin Mania 17. And as you said, there are people who now slag off. Some people go, they can't wrestle, they do the same moves. You had Austin, who was a brawler, who liked to punch, kick people. Then you had The Rock, who was an amazing seller. Compared to maybe some of the modern guys, had maybe a bit of a limited move set, if we can word it that way. But you put them two together, and in my opinion, I look at wrestling over the past maybe 10 years. Has there been a match that's even remotely came close to the level of that match? I don't think so.
Well, you know yourself, again, whenever they announced the year before that they were going to do Rock John Cena, we were like, right, this is it. This is the Mania we have to go to. And like even that night, you know, with The Rock coming back in Miami and, you know, at the Sun Life Stadium, the atmosphere was amazing. And it was one of them matches where it's like, Jesus Christ, who the hell is going to win this? Because Cena's Cena, and this is The Rock's comeback match, like effectively, like. And it was like, I mean, if it hadn't been announced it was going to be in Rock and John Cena, would we have went to that WrestleMania? Who knows? But because of The Rock coming back, it was like, right, this is it. This is the one we have to go to. And I mean, that WrestleMania is still the highest grossing WrestleMania of all time. And, you know, the buy rate for it was sensational. And I mean, that's because of The Rock. Like, and you know yourself, like even we were outside the ground and all and going into it, like was you could feel like there was like, pardon the pun, like an electricity like about the place. Like, you know, there was an atmosphere. It was like a big match feel. And that was because of The Rock coming back, and obviously John Cena as well. But Rock for me is just, no matter what he speaks, like he encapsulates me and the audience, and I don't think that'll ever be topped. And like you're saying there about, you know, other matches and other wrestlers, you know, Rock Austin, like WrestleMania 17 for me is the best WrestleMania of all time, and Rock Austin was a fantastic feud, the great build up, like the promo itself for it was unbelievable. And it's again, this top four list was so hard to pick. Like Austin missed out, and like, you know, he's somebody that I always liked as well. And just when you said about him there, but then like there's another Rock Austin in WrestleMania 19, which Rock won, was very good as well. And you know, and then even Rock Hogan at WrestleMania 18, the Rock like that, like I mean, again, I know I've mentioned him already, but Jim Cornette even says, if I was listening to a thing the other week where he was talking about it and said the crowd turned on The Rock and he was able to handle it and like switch roles and it didn't faze him at all. He was maybe the likes of Austin, they wouldn't have been able to handle that, but Rock is so good, he could handle any crowd in any environment. And I think that's a testament to the man. Like, so
Yeah.
for me, he's always going to be my number one.
And you know something else The Rock needs to get credit for, and I think he never gets a credit for this. Hulk Hogan has a reputation. He didn't put an awful lot of people over. Triple H had a bit of a reputation, especially those early 2000 years. He wouldn't put many guys over. The Rock put people over consistently and managed to stay in the top two potentially of all time when people talk about The Rock and Austin. You know, other people might want to throw Hogan and Flair into that mix, but you know, it depends, I think, of when you started watching wrestling. But you even look at 1999, The Rock was entering feuds with Billy Gunn. The Rock was feuding with mid-carders. In my opinion, The Rock elevated Jericho to the main event with their feud in around September, SummerSlammy September and onwards in 2001, before Jericho won the Undisputed title. And I think sometimes people are like, oh, this person's amazing, he does really good moves. And I'm like, really cool. But if someone beats that person, where does it leave them? The same place where they started. When someone pins The Rock, they are immediately elevated, in my opinion. And I think
Kurt Angle was another one. Kurt Angle.
Rock never gets enough credit, in my opinion, especially in terms of putting people over. You know, when people talk about Lesnar's run in 2002, they talk about him beating the Hardys, they talk about him winning the title at SummerSlam against Rock, and then they really focus on Taker. And fair enough, Taker is a big fish, but people wouldn't have legitimately believed Brock had a chance against Taker if he didn't knock off Rock first. And Rock done the job perfectly in a very underrated match at SummerSlam 2002.
He put Goldberg over whenever he came over from WCW as well. And had he not done that, would he have had anywhere near as much traction as he did before he went into the feud with Triple H? Probably not.
And another thing that was under the radar, I don't know if you've ever heard Hogan talk about Mini 18. Hogan has went on record and said if it wasn't for The Rock being like, let's do Mini 18 together, that he felt he was sort of falling away into obscurity. It was only really when WWE put him against Rock that he really elevated himself again.
I was sure they ended up, because it was such a good match and he was so popular and stuff, they ended up giving him another title reign and stuff and all because of that. But yeah, like Rock, I don't think he gets enough credit at all. Like, again, it's listen, it's all about preference and opinions at the end of the day. Like, you're going to get people that will like some wrestlers and won't like others and vice versa. I'm sure every single person that you have on for this type of show is going to give you a different list of 4 and different order and stuff. You're not going. I very much doubt you're going to get somebody with the exact same list as somebody else. I very much doubt it, and that's, I suppose, the interesting thing about the debate itself. But for me, you knew it yourself from day one. You knew what I was going to say. You knew it was going to be Rock, like, and yeah, I'll stick by it. He's the one that drew me into wrestling, and anytime he's ever back, it's always a plus.
Yeah, 100%. He definitely draws eyes to the product. But Neil, it's been our pleasure having you back on the Pottscast and the Mount Rushmore of favorite wrestlers of all time. This episode will be on YouTube. If you want to reach out to us, I'll be at the Pottscast WC on Twitter, and Neil is on Twitter at NeelersC if you want to give him any abuse whatsoever for any of his opinions on wrestling. So Neil, thanks once again for coming onto the show, and your final words.
Well, you're saying there, you can fire any tweets his way for any abuse that's coming his way. I'll just say one thing. Just bring it.
That's all, folks. Thanks for watching.